At 3:00 the morning, I was awakened by the sound of the phone. When I answered, I heard my son's voice. "Mom, open the door. It's freezing out here." I froze, paralyzed, because my son had died 2 years ago. But suddenly, the doorbell began to ring insistently. When my daughter-in-law looked through the peephole, she screamed with all her might and fell to the floor, trembling. I approached to look as well, and what I saw left me breathless. I am Eleanor Vance, a 4-year-old American woman living in a sprawling mansion on the outskirts of the city, in the quiet, wealthy suburbs of Connecticut, together with my daughter-in-law. After my son's death, I thought I would live the rest of my days in solitude, until one night, everything changed forever. I woke up with a start in the middle of the night. It wasn't because of an alarm or the wind blowing outside. It was the ringtone of the telephone. It was a specific ringtone I had chosen exclusively for Eddie, my son. But how could that be? Eddie had been gone for 2 years, lost in a horrific accident that, every time I remember it, feels like a part of me dies, too. The room was completely dark, illuminated only by the faint blue glow of the cell phone on the nightstand. I squinted, trying to see clearly as the letters on the screen danced before me. Eddie, beloved son. I felt a tightness in my chest. The air got stuck in my throat. Eddie was dead. I had organized his funeral myself. I had cried while hugging his photo until I ran out of tears. So, why? Why was his name appearing there, and why right now? My hands shook so badly that I almost dropped the phone trying to pick it up. I slid my finger across the screen, accepted the call, and put it to my ear, holding my breath. A second of silence felt like an eternity. Then, a voice sounded deep, somewhat raspy, so familiar that it split my soul in two. "Mom." I froze. It was Eddie. There could be no doubt. I had heard that voice thousands of times when he was a child, when he grew up, when he laughed, or when he comforted me. But now, that voice was accompanied by the sound of freezing wind and the chattering of teeth. "Open the door. It's freezing out here." The call cut off abruptly. The screen went black, and I remained sitting there on that immense bed, my body rigid. A cold sweat ran down the back of my neck and down my spine. I stood up, stumbling. Without turning on the light, I ran out of the room and traversed the long, dark hallway. At the end of the hall was the room of Valerie, my daughter-in-law, the only person I had left after Eddie was gone. I pounded on the door over and over again, my voice cracking. "Valerie, open the door. Valerie." The door flew open. Valerie was there, her hair messy, eyes puffy from sleep, and an expression of annoyance. "Mom, what is going on at this hour?" She crossed her arms, looking at me as if I were overreacting. I grabbed her by the arm, gasping, my voice broken. "Eddie called me. He said he's at the door. That he's cold." Valerie frowned, took a step back, and pulled her arm away. Her eyes showed a slight irritation. "You had another nightmare again, Mom," she said in a neutral tone. "You miss Eddie a lot. Go back to bed. Don't dwell on it anymore." Her words fell on me like ice water. I wanted to explain to her that it wasn't a hallucination, that I had heard his voice, but before I could open my mouth, another sound erupted and left me speechless. The doorbell rang long, sad, and echoing through the empty house. Valerie and I stood paralyzed. We looked at each other without saying a thing. Her sleepy expression vanished instantly, replaced by pure terror. Her face turned white, her lips moved as if trying to speak, but no sound came out. "No, that can't be," she whispered with a trembling voice, almost inaudible. Then she placed a hand on her chest, breathing with difficulty, as if the air had left the room. I didn't understand what was happening, but the fear in Valerie froze my blood. "Valerie, what's wrong with you?" I asked, but she didn't answer. She backed away, leaning against the wall with her gaze fixed toward the stairs. "Let me see," she said with a broken voice and ran down the stairs into the darkness. I ran after her, my heart beating so hard I felt it was going to explode. We reached the front door. Valerie didn't turn on the porch light. She just pressed her eye to the peephole, breathing heavily. I was behind her, holding onto her sleeve, not daring to say a word. A second passed, and suddenly Valerie let out a heart-wrenching scream, as if she had just seen the most horrible thing in the world. She fell to the floor, her back hitting the wall, She covered her head with her hands, trembling uncontrollably. "Valerie," I shouted, kneeling beside her, trying to help her get up, but she pushed my hands away and screamed between sobs. "No! No! Don't come back! Go away!" Her eyes were wide open, filled with terror, as if she were looking at a ghost outside. "Eddie, he has returned. He has returned for revenge," Valerie cried inconsolably, saying phrases that made no sense, her voice broken. Her words left me frozen. I didn't understand anything. But the horror in Valerie's eyes wouldn't let me stay still. I stood up trembling, approached the door, and pressed my eye to the peephole. I looked outside with my heart about to burst, preparing myself for anything. But there was nothing. The front yard was empty. Only the yellow light of the street lamp illuminated the bushes rustling in the night wind. Not a shadow, not a sign. I turned around. I saw Valerie still huddled in the corner, hugging her head, murmuring endlessly, "He has returned. He has returned for revenge." I tried to tell her there was no one outside, that perhaps we had gotten scared over nothing, but Valerie didn't seem to hear me. I sat on the floor, a few steps away from her, breathing deeply to calm myself, but inside I felt a storm unleashing. Something wasn't right. There was something in Valerie that I had never seen before. I stood up, took her by the arm, and helped her back to her room. She didn't resist, she just walked like a body without a soul. I tucked her in, put the blanket over her, but her eyes remained lost, fixed on the ceiling. "Rest, dear," I told her with a raspy voice, but as I closed the door, I knew that nothing was right. The next morning, I woke up with irritated, heavy eyes. I hadn't been able to sleep all night. I went down the stairs, dragging my feet. Valerie was already in the kitchen, sitting at the table, flipping through a fashion magazine. In front of her, a steaming cup of coffee filled the room with its intense aroma. She looked up and smiled at me sweetly, as if nothing had happened the night before. "You're awake, Mom. I made you coffee. It's on the table." I stood there staring at Valerie. Her smile was so perfect it was scary. I pulled out the chair and sat down, but I didn't touch the cup of coffee. "Valerie," I spoke with a voice hoarse from lack of sleep. "Last night, what happened? What did you see outside the door?" Valerie set the magazine aside and sighed. She tilted her head, looking at me with compassion. "Mom, maybe both of us are just too stressed. You had a nightmare, and I got scared because of the doorbell. I got nervous too. Surely it was just some drunk who rang the bell by mistake in this neighborhood. That's actually quite normal." She shrugged as if talking about something unimportant. I didn't answer. Valerie's explanation was too fluid, too logical, but it failed to calm the unease scratching at my insides. In the following days, Valerie acted as if nothing had happened. She bought a bouquet of white daisies and placed it in the living room. She played soft Mozart music and even invited me to look at old family photo albums. "Look, Mom," she smiled, pointing to a photo of Eddie on the beach with a radiant smile. "He always liked the ocean. Do you remember that day? The whole family grilling fish outdoors." Her voice was soft, nostalgic, but every word of hers was like a stab in my heart. I nodded, smiling clumsily, but inside I couldn't stop observing Valerie. I began to notice small details I hadn't seen before. Sometimes her hands trembled when holding her teacup, although she tried to hide it by setting the cup down quickly. Some nights, when I couldn't sleep, I heard her footsteps pacing endlessly in her room, as if she couldn't find sleep either. And her eyes, though always accompanied by a smile, showed a glint of unease, as if she knew something terrible was about to happen. I started to doubt myself. Was I imagining everything? Was the pain of losing Eddie making me paranoid, seeing conspiracies everywhere? I opened my phone and went into the call history. The name Eddie Vance was still there, with a call registered at 3 a.m. with an exact duration of 12 seconds. I touched the screen, tried to call back, as if that could make me hear my son's voice again. But there was nothing. Only the frozen silence and the long, desperate tone. 3 days after that dreadful night, I was in the backyard garden pruning the rose bushes that Eddie liked so much. Suddenly, the phone in my apron pocket vibrated, making me drop the shears in fright. I wiped my hands quickly, my heart beating with force. The screen lit up, and I almost stopped breathing when I saw the name, Eddie Vance. I pressed to answer, brought the phone to my ear, and held my breath. This time there was no wind or chattering teeth. The voice on the other side was calm, clear, without interference. "Mom, it's me." It was Eddie, there was no doubt. But this time his voice didn't tremble from the cold, it sounded firm and sure. I fell seated onto the nearby bench. Tears began to flow uncontrollably. "Eddie. Son." My voice broke. I couldn't complete the sentence. In my head, thousands of questions crowded together. "Are you alive? How can this be? Where have you been these 2 years?" But I couldn't say anything, only sob brokenly. "Mom, I'm alive," Eddie said, as if he could read my thoughts. "I'll explain everything later. Tomorrow at 9 a.m., can you come alone to the Shadow Café on the outskirts of the city?" My son's voice hardened with a caution I had never heard in him before. "Do not let Valerie find out under any circumstances." Then the call cut off without a word of goodbye. I remained motionless in the garden with the phone still clenched in my hand. The afternoon sun illuminated the rose bushes, making the thorns shine like small knives. Eddie's words resonated in my head. "Do not let Valerie find out." Why? Valerie is his wife, the one who has been by my side during these 2 years, sharing the pain of his loss. But then I remembered the look of horror in her eyes that night, her screams, and her murmurs about revenge. A freezing hunch awakened in me. There is something about Valerie that I don't know, and Eddie is trying to protect me. That evening, Valerie returned carrying bags from luxury brands. She entered the living room with a radiant smile, as if she had won the lottery. "Mom, I bought a beautiful scarf. Look." She pulled out an emerald green silk scarf, soft as water. "I think it would look perfect on you. Try it on," she said with enthusiasm. I took the scarf, forcing a smile. "Thank you, it's very lovely." I feigned a long yawn, saying I was tired and wanted to go to bed early. Valerie nodded, but I noticed a flash of suspicion in her gaze, as if she were trying to read my thoughts. The next morning, I got up while it was still dark. I chose a simple gray dress. I didn't want to attract attention. In front of the mirror, I observed my face. A 6'4" woman with marked wrinkles and tired eyes. For 2 years, I had lived like a shadow, existing only for the memories of Eddie and Valerie's comfort. But now, everything seemed to be crumbling. I tied back my hair, took a deep breath, and tried to calm the tremor in my hands. When I went down to the kitchen, I was startled to see Valerie there preparing a pitcher of herbal tea. The aroma of chamomile and mint filled the air softly, but it made me shudder. She looked up and smiled at me as always. "You're up early, Mom. I made you tea. It will help you relax." Her voice was sweet, but in her look, there was a spark of scrutiny I couldn't ignore. I took the cup with trembling hands. "Thank you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I brought the cup to my lips, pretended to take a sip, but I didn't let a single drop touch my tongue. After that terrifying night, after Eddie's words, I no longer trusted anything that came from Valerie. I put the cup on the table, forcing a smile. "It's very tasty, but I'm going to drink it slowly. It's still hot." Valerie nodded and returned to the pitcher of tea, but I noticed how her shoulders tensed slightly, as if trying to hide an emotion. I stood up and lied, saying I had an appointment with Mrs. Soto at the book club. "We're going to church and then having lunch together," I said with a neutral voice, as if it were any ordinary day. Valerie didn't take long to show herself attentive. "Do you want me to drive you? It's far, and it's not comfortable to go in a taxi." She tilted her head with an expression of fake concern. My heart was beating hard, but I waved my hand naturally. "No, thanks. I prefer to take a cab. That way I can relax and look at the city a bit." I smiled at her, but inside, the only thing I wanted was to run out of that house. I took a taxi right in front of the mansion's gate and, with a trembling voice, gave the address for the Shadow Café. During the entire ride, I huddled in the back seat, looking out the window, seeing nothing but the blurry silhouettes of the city. In my head, Eddie's voice repeated over and over, "Go alone. Don't let Valerie find out, no matter what happens." What if it was a trap? A cruel joke by someone who wanted to take advantage of my pain? But that voice, the certainty in every word, couldn't be fake. I squeezed my purse tight, feeling the phone inside, as if it were the last thread still connecting me to my son. The Shadow Café was hidden in a narrow alley. The wooden sign, faded and stained by rain and sun, was barely distinguishable. I pushed the door, and a little bell rang with a soft tinkle. Inside, the atmosphere was dim, with a faint smell of freshly roasted coffee and old newspaper. There were only a few elderly customers sitting here and there in silence, reading or drinking their coffee. I scanned the place with my gaze, my heart beating with force, and then I saw him. In the farthest corner, next to a window covered by vines, a man was sitting with his back turned. His figure broad but thin shoulders, dark and thick hair falling messily over the nape of his neck, everything felt painfully familiar. Although he was much thinner than the Eddie I remembered, I recognized him instantly. It was my son. My heart stopped for a second, then beat with such force I felt it was going to explode. I approached step by step with the sensation that if I hurried, that image would dissolve like a dream. Just a few steps away, the man seemed to perceive my presence. He turned his head slowly, and yes, it was him. My son's face looked gaunt, skin burned by the sun, with deep circles under his eyes. He had a small scar on his forehead, something that wasn't there before, and that hurt me to see, but his eyes, those warm and bright eyes that always looked at me with unconditional love, were my Eddie's. Eddie stood up suddenly, and the wooden chair creaked under his weight. I couldn't hold back anymore. I ran to him, hugged him tight, and broke into tears. The tears fell without control, soaking his old, worn shirt. "Eddie, why come back only now?" I said between sobs, gently hitting his back, partly claiming answers, partly venting the pain. I touched his face, his arms, feeling the warmth of his skin. I needed to ensure he wasn't a ghost. He was him, my son of flesh and blood. Standing in front of me, Eddie hugged me tightly. His shoulders trembled. "Forgive me, Mom. Forgive me," he said with a broken voice. On his clothes, I smelled the salt of the sea and a trace of wood smoke, as if he had survived hard days I couldn't even imagine. We stayed like that, embracing in the middle of that small cafe, disregarding the curious looks of the few customers. In that instant, the world stopped. My son had returned. A miracle had occurred. After a long while, we finally let go. Eddie pulled out a chair for me with a raspy voice. "Mom, sit down." I sat without letting go of his hand, as if by doing so my son would disappear again. Eddie looked at me with eyes full of love, but immediately his expression changed to a seriousness that was almost painful. "Mom," he said with a deep voice, "stay calm. Something horrible happened to me, and I need your help." The waiter retreated, leaving a glass of golden orange juice in front of me. Eddie took a deep breath, lowered his voice almost to a whisper. "Mom, what did Valerie tell you about the night I disappeared?" His question made me fall silent. I looked into Eddie's eyes and saw in them a mixture of alert and pain. I swallowed saliva, trying to organize the memories, those broken fragments of 2 years of suffering. "Valerie." I started with a scratchy voice. Crying, she told me that on the night at the yacht, you had drunk a lot and insisted on jumping into the sea to swim, that she begged you, tried to stop you, but you didn't listen. Then she said she saw you disappear among the waves. The tears stung as I remembered that scene, even though I only lived her retelling. She said she was helpless, that she couldn't do anything to save you. I stopped for a moment. I breathed with a slight tremor. Afterward, I hired a rescue team. I spent a lot of money searching for you all over the area. I couldn't believe it had happened like that. But days passed, and they found nothing. Valerie hugged me, cried with me, and in the end, it was she who asked me to stop. She told me, "He's gone, Mom. I saw him sink with my own eyes. We have to accept it." I clenched my fists, nails digging into my skin. I had to organize your funeral, even though there was no body, and I ended up believing that you really weren't here anymore. Eddie remained silent while I spoke. His gaze darkened as if every word were a direct stab to the heart. Then he clenched his fists so hard his knuckles turned white. He shook his head. His voice trembled with rage. "It was all a lie, Mom." Eddie's words hit me like a lightning bolt. I looked at him, mouth agape, unable to emit a sound. "Lie?" I whispered, feeling a chill run down my back. Eddie nodded with pain marked in his eyes. He breathed deeply, as if gathering the courage to tell a story that not even he wanted to relive. That night, he began with a deep, deliberate voice, was the party on Jay's yacht, my best friend. Everything was luxurious. The music, the laughter, the lights reflecting on the sea. I was happy, Mom. I wanted to invite Valerie to the deck to see the fireworks together, but when I returned, she wasn't there. He paused, lowering his gaze to the table as if reliving every second. I searched for her all over the yacht, from the dance floor to the bar, but nothing. Finally, I went up to the upper deck, the loneliest part, and heard Valerie's voice. Eddie leaned toward me. His voice became lower, tense. She was talking on the phone, hiding behind a pillar. I didn't want to spy, but what she was saying left me frozen. The insurance policy, the old woman, a sudden heart attack. No one will suspect anything. Eddie's voice broke. He gripped the edge of the table tightly as if trying to contain his anger. "Mom, she was talking about you, about how to kill you to collect the life insurance." I felt my blood freeze. I looked at Eddie with my head spinning. "Kill Mom?" I repeated with a trembling voice. Eddie nodded with a painful but firm look. I ran out to confront her. At first, she got scared, denied everything, said I had heard wrong. But when I snatched the phone from her, Valerie couldn't pretend anymore. She screamed, confessed everything. Eddie continued recounting, his voice broken by emotion. She said she had lost a lot of money in the stock market, that she owed money to loan sharks from organized crime, and that she had no way out. If she didn't pay, they would kill her, and her plan was to poison you to collect the life insurance that was in your name. She said that without that money, the one who was going to die was her. He paused, took a deep breath. I told her I would divorce her immediately. I told her I would protect you at all costs, no matter what she did. I sat there, completely frozen. Every word from Eddie was like a stab directly to the heart. Valerie, the girl I considered a daughter, who stood by my side, who dried my tears, had planned to kill me. I wanted to scream, wanted to deny it, but Eddie's gaze, the sincerity in his voice, left no room for doubt. And then Eddie continued with a lower voice, as if he were reliving a nightmare. That sentence changed everything. Valerie went completely crazy. She screamed. She begged me not to destroy her. We started to struggle on the deck of the boat. I turned around, ready to leave to call the police, but then I felt a very strong force from behind. She pushed me. "Mom." With all her might, she pushed me over the railing. I covered my mouth. Tears sprang forth uncontrollably. "Eddie," I whispered, but he shook his head, indicating I should keep listening. The last thing I remember was the freezing hit of the water. I saw Valerie standing on the deck, looking at me from above with an empty gaze, without a cry for help, without a trace of regret. Then she turned around and left as if I had never existed. I brought my hand to my chest. I felt my heart compressing. The image of Eddie falling into the sea, alone in the darkness, destroyed me. "How did you survive?" I asked with a trembling voice. Eddie smiled sadly. "I don't know for sure, Mom. The waves dragged me to some rocks near the shore. I hit my head against a submerged stone and everything went black. When I woke up, I was in a small cabin by the sea. A couple of older fishermen, Mark and Isabel, found me and saved me." He paused with a lost gaze. "But I didn't remember anything, Mom. I didn't know who I was or where I came from. For 2 years, I lived with them. I went out fishing with Mark as if I were a completely different person." I took Eddie's hand. I felt the calluses on his skin, signs of 2 years of hard work. "And then, how did you remember everything?" I asked, with tears running down my cheeks. "A few weeks ago," Eddie recounted, "I was on Mark's boat when I saw a yacht pass by. There was something in that scene, the lights, the sound of the waves, that made all the memories come back at once. The scene on the deck, Valerie's voice, the push. Everything appeared with clarity. I knew I had to find you, had to warn you." He looked at me with an expression full of determination. "Mom, Valerie didn't just hurt me. She is still planning to hurt you." Eddie's words froze my blood. I thought of Valerie, of her fake smile, of the way she looked at me with suspicion. I remembered the night the doorbell rang, Valerie's panic when looking through the peephole. Now I understood. She didn't fear ghosts. She feared her crimes were coming back to collect the bill. Pain and rage burned inside me like a silent flame, but I forced myself to stay calm, to listen to what my son had to say. Eddie looked me straight in the eyes. His gaze was cold, full of worry. "Mom," he said with a firm voice, "her original plan 2 years ago was to poison you. Think carefully. In the last few months, has there been anything you've eaten or drunk that only Valerie has prepared?" Eddie's question was like a bolt of lightning. I stayed in shock, shook my head by reflex, and responded in a low voice. No, I've always been the one who cooks at home. She only helps with small things. But then I stopped. An image crossed my mind, sharp as a ray of sun through fog. The teapot every night. Wait, I said with a trembling voice. There is one thing. For about 2 months, every night she prepares me a pot of chamomile tea. She says that since I have trouble sleeping, that would help me. Eddie leaned forward, narrowing his eyes as if he had just discovered a key clue. And how have you felt after drinking it? He asked, with a low but tense voice. I swallowed saliva, trying to remember. I feel more tired, exhausted. The next morning my head buzzes. It's very hard for me to concentrate. I thought it was the effect of the tea or age. I stopped, and another memory emerged, tying a knot in my chest. And my hair is falling out more when I shower. The doctor said it was age, but Eddie interrupted me with a voice almost like a growl. It's not age, Mom. She is poisoning you little by little so no one suspects. His words were like a cold, accurate knife, stabbing directly into my heart. I looked at Eddie, feeling a chill run down my spine. The idea that Valerie, that girl I considered a daughter, whom I trusted blindly, was poisoning me in silence. It left me breathless. Eddie took something out of his jacket pocket, a small glass vial, the kind used for eye drops, already clean. He placed it in the palm of my hand with a firm gaze. Tonight, and every night following, you have to act well, he said with a low but decided voice. Accept the tea. Tell her it's delicious, but do not drink a single drop. He took my hand, giving clear instructions. Find a moment to dispose of it in the sink, in the balcony planter, wherever no one sees you. But before throwing it away, you have to keep a little in this vial. We need proof. I squeezed the small vial, feeling the cold glass in the palm of my hand. It was tiny, but it weighed as if it carried my son's destiny and mine. I nodded my head without saying anything, but inside me, a cold decision was forming. I would do what Eddie told me. I was going to unmask Valerie, however painful it might be. The conversation ended. Eddie paid the bill and left in a hurry, asking me to stay 15 minutes longer to avoid crossing paths with anyone known. I stayed there looking at the glass of orange juice in front of me, but I couldn't drink. Every sound in the cafe, the clinking of a glass, the murmur of a customer made me jump. I felt like a cornered animal, trying to maintain calm in its cage. Upon returning home, the family mansion seemed like a gilded cage full of traps. I pushed the door and entered, striving to keep my face serene. Valerie was in the living room, sitting on the sofa with a glass of red wine in her hand, and her gaze passed over me. "Did you have a good time, Mom?" she asked with a radiant, but icy, smile. I nodded, answering with indifference. "Yes, very well, dear. I met up with Mrs. Soto. We talked for a while and I ended up a bit tired." I turned around, avoiding her gaze, feeling the hairs on the back of my neck stand up. That night my heart beat with force when Valerie entered the living room with a steaming white porcelain cup in her hands. The soft aroma of chamomile that used to relax me now smelled of death. "Here is your tea, Mom," she said, placing the cup in front of me with a perfect smile. I took it, trying not to let the trembling of my hands show. "Thank you, dear," I said, bringing the cup to my lips and pretending to take a sip. I smiled with a soft voice. "You always make the best tea." Valerie nodded, returned to the sofa, and turned on a fashion program on the television. I watched her out of the corner of my eye. She seemed concentrated on the screen, but I knew I couldn't let my guard down. "I'm going to the study for my glasses," I said, getting up with the cup in my hand. Valerie just nodded without looking at me. I walked fast toward the kitchen, my heart about to burst out of my chest. My hands shook as I opened the small vial, carefully pouring a little of the tea inside. The aroma of chamomile intensified as I tilted the cup, and a shiver ran through me. I threw the rest of the tea down the sink and turned on the faucet with force to erase any trace. I hid the vial deep in the pocket of my robe, later hanging it in the walk-in closet, a place Valerie rarely visited. When I returned to the living room, I sat down, feigning fatigue. "Age is already affecting me, dear. My eyesight is failing quite a bit," I said, forcing a smile. Valerie looked at me with a flash of bewilderment, but soon smiled again. "Rest, Mom. Don't stay up so late." Her voice was sweet, but I felt the falsehood in every word. That night I lay in bed with my eyes open looking at the ceiling. The glass vial weighed on my mind like a slab. The next morning, when I went down the stairs, Valerie was already in the kitchen making breakfast. The smell of toast and coffee filled the air, but it only gave me chills. She looked up with her resplendent smile as always. "You're awake. Mom, did you sleep better last night? Did my tea do you good?" Her voice was soft, attentive, but I detected an inquisitive nuance in her gaze. I nodded, forcing a smile. "Yes, I slept like a log. Your tea really works." The lie came out easily, but my heart beat hard, as if fearing Valerie could read my soul. We had breakfast together, but I barely tried a piece of bread with the excuse that my stomach hurt. Valerie nodded, but I noticed she observed me out of the corner of her eye, as if evaluating every one of my movements. "Mom, remember to take your vitamins," she said with a sweet voice. I nodded, but inside I promised myself not to touch anything she had prepared. After breakfast, I pretended I needed to go to the supermarket for fresh produce. Before leaving the house, I went into the closet, carefully wrapped the glass vial in a silk handkerchief, and hid it at the bottom of my purse. The cold of the glass reminded me of the weight of the responsibility I carried. I arranged to meet Eddie in the underground parking lot of the supermarket, a place full of people, but where no one pays attention to anyone else. When the taxi stopped, I got out with a racing heart, feeling like a spy in a thriller movie. I looked around, my heart beating with force, and saw Eddie's old pickup truck parked in a secluded corner. My son was in the driver's seat, his sharp gaze scanning the place as if expecting imminent danger. I opened the door quickly and sat in the passenger seat. Without saying a word, I took out the silk handkerchief and handed it to Eddie. He unwrapped it carefully, looked at the little vial in his hands, and his expression hardened. "You did very well, Mom," he said in a low but firm voice. "Keep going just like this. Stay safe. I will let you know as soon as I have the results." He paused and looked at me with worry. "If you can, try to get another sample tomorrow. The more evidence we have, the better." I nodded, feeling a cold determination surge inside me. "I'm going to achieve it," I responded, with more firmness than I expected. Eddie took my hand. His hands, rough from hard work, were warm and transmitted strength to me. "I trust you, Mom," he whispered, and for a moment I felt we were one, mother and son, facing the darkness surrounding us. The next 3 days felt like 3 centuries. Every night I repeated my act. I received the cup of tea Valerie offered me. I pretended to take a sip, praised its flavor, and then looked for how to get rid of it. One night I poured the tea into the balcony planter, watching the drops disappear into the earth as if burying a horrible secret. Another night I threw it in the bathroom sink, turning on the tap forcefully to erase any trace. Every time I did it, my heart beat with force, fearing Valerie would appear suddenly and discover everything. Valerie seemed increasingly impatient. She started asking strange questions, as if testing the waters. "You feel strange, Mom. Lately, I see you a bit tired," she would say while observing me. I responded vaguely, "Yes, it must be age. I get tired more easily." But I noticed a change in her gaze, as if she wasn't satisfied with my answer. Once she asked me, "Does the food taste good? I've noticed you almost don't eat." I smiled at her and told her I was on a diet, but inside I knew she already suspected something. On the afternoon of the 3rd day, I was watering the plants on the porch, trying to keep my hands steady. The cell phone vibrated in my pocket, making me jump and spill a little water on the ground. I dried my hands quickly and answered. It was Eddie. "Mom." His voice sounded urgent, but serene. "I have the results. I need to see you now in the same place as always." I didn't ask anything, just nodded, even though he couldn't see me. I said I was going out to buy vitamins. I put on a thick coat to hide the second vial I had obtained the night before. In the parking lot, I got into Eddie's truck again. This time my son didn't say anything. He just silently handed me a letter-sized sheet folded in 4. I opened it with trembling hands. It was an analysis result from a private laboratory. I didn't understand the long chemical terms, but my eyes locked onto a word circled in red ballpoint pen: arsenic. Underneath, a handwritten note froze my blood. Low concentration does not cause immediate death, but accumulates in the body, leading to hepatic and renal failure and death in a few months. Extremely sophisticated method. The sheet slid from my hands and fell to the floor of the car. I covered my mouth, containing a sob. So it was true. It was no longer suspicion or intuition, it was proof of a cold-blooded murder plan. Valerie, the young woman I once loved and considered family, was poisoning me in silence, drop by drop, day after day. I thought of the cups of chamomile tea, of her fake smile, and felt a wave of rage mixed with pain rise up my chest. Eddie took my hand. His was warm and firm. "Mom," he said with a low but decided voice, "we already have proof that she wants to kill you, but to reopen the case from 2 years ago, we need more. We need an expert." I looked him in the eyes. The shock gave way to a cold determination. I took a deep breath and responded firmly. "I know someone. Emmett Reeves. He was the chief of police, a friend of your father. Now he has a private detective agency. He owes our family a favor. Years ago, your dad saved his life during a bank robbery. The next day, I called Emmett Reeves. His voice answered on the second ring grave, calm, but with that sharpness of someone who has dealt with criminals. "Mrs. Vance, it's been a long time. What makes you call me so early?" I took a breath, trying to sound serene. "Emmett, it's a delicate family matter. I need your help. Can we meet today?" I didn't tell him everything over the phone, just enough so he understood the gravity of the matter. Emmett accepted immediately, citing me at a secluded diner in the historic center, far from the bustle. I went alone, wearing a long coat to hide my anxiety. The place was small, with stained walls and the smell of old oil. I felt as if I were entering another world. Emmett was already there, his graying hair, his gaze sharp as a razor. He stood up, shook my hand, but didn't smile. "Mrs. Vance, you don't look well. What is happening?" He went straight to the point. I took the result of the arsenic exam out of my purse and put it on the table. "Emmett, I suspect my daughter-in-law Valerie is poisoning me, and I think she is related to Eddie's death 2 years ago." I omitted that Eddie was alive. I only mentioned that recent signs made me doubt my son's accident was so simple. I told him about the chamomile tea, the strange tiredness, the growing fear inside me. Emmett listened in silence, without interrupting me. He looked at the sheet, then looked at me with a gaze so penetrating I felt he was reading my soul. "Mrs. Vance, I will accept this case. Give me a week." Upon returning home, I continued with my act, but now I was more alert than ever. Not just with the nightly cups of tea, I started paying attention to everything. I only ate what I cooked myself from start to finish. I checked every ingredient carefully. I only drank bottled water. I opened the cap myself, even if that made me feel paranoid. But after what Eddie told me, after that lab result, I couldn't take any risks. Valerie seemed to notice my change. One day she prepared a fruit salad plate that looked delicious, full of fresh pineapple, mango, and strawberries. "Mom, try this. I just learned the recipe. It's great for your health," she said with a radiant smile. I smiled at her. I took a piece of pineapple and brought it to my mouth, but when she turned around to get water, I spit it into a napkin and threw it in the trash can. My heart beat with force, fearing she would return and discover me. "It's delicious, dear," I said, trying to sound natural. Valerie nodded, but I saw how her gaze passed over me, as if trying to read my thoughts. A week passed as slowly as a century. Valerie was increasingly irritable and insecure. She made calls in secret in her room with a rushed tone and in a low voice. Once, when passing by there by chance, she hung up abruptly and smiled forcedly. "It was just a friend, Mom, work stuff." But I knew she was hiding something. The falsehood in Valerie's smile was now as evident as the light of day, and I wondered why I hadn't seen it before. Exactly 1 week later, Emmett called me. His voice was serious, almost cold. "Mrs. Vance, I have what you need. Come to my office. But don't come alone. Bring someone you trust fully." I understood what he meant. I communicated in secret with Eddie, and we agreed to meet near the detective's office. Upon seeing him get out of his old truck, I ran to hug him with tears about to come out. "I'm very scared, Eddie," I whispered. He squeezed my shoulders with a firm voice. "You are not alone, Mom. I'm here." Emmett Reeves' office was on the second floor of an old building, full of papers and with a faint smell of cigar smoke. He was sitting behind his desk with a sharp gaze running over Eddie and me. Upon seeing Eddie, he only frowned a little for a second and then nodded, as if he had already guessed part of the story. He didn't ask anything else. He simply placed a thick brown envelope on the table. "Here are the results of the surveillance on Valerie during the last week," he said with a grave voice. Eddie opened the envelope. His hand trembled a little. Inside was a bunch of photos taken from afar, but very clear. In the first one, Valerie was driving toward a rough neighborhood on the outskirts, with dirty alleys full of trash. In the following ones, she was meeting secretly with a man of rough appearance, wearing a torn jacket. Valerie handed him a wad of bills, and the man gave her a small package of white powder that she kept in her jacket pocket. I covered my mouth. I felt my chest tight as if I lacked air, but the most horrible part was still to come. Emmett placed a small recorder on the table and pressed the play button. A buzzing sound was heard, and then a rough male voice said, "Arsenic is extremely expensive lately. It's a rare product. Give me more money." Valerie's voice responded as sharp as a blade. "Do you think I print money or what? Wait until I collect that old woman's life insurance." The man let out a mocking laugh. "And why don't you do it faster? Why drag it out so much?" Valerie answered with a calculating coldness. "How stupid you are. 2 years ago that lady's son died. If I killed her right after, the weird thing would be if the police didn't suspect me. I had to wait. I had to let everything calm down." The recording ended. The room remained in absolute silence. I felt as if the air had been emptied from my chest, all my suspicions, now confirmed with the cruelest words. Eddie clenched his fists, veins bulging on the back of his hands. I looked at him and saw the fury in his eyes, but also the pain of someone betrayed by the person he once loved. Emmett broke the silence, his voice calm but sharp. "The proof of the poisoning is already compelling, but to accuse her of attempted homicide against her husband, we are still missing a piece." I nodded, feeling a cold determination take over me. "We are going to find that piece," I said firmly. "I will do whatever it takes, but Valerie is not going to get away with this." We left Emmett's office and entered a bustling street. Sitting in Eddie's old truck, neither of us said a word. Suddenly, Eddie gripped the steering wheel with force and then hit it with his fist. The loud noise made me jump. "Damn it!" he shouted, with a voice hoarse from rage and helplessness. "How the hell are we going to prove what happened on the deck of the boat? It was just her, me, and the damn sea. My word can't stand against hers without proof." I looked at him, his eyes reddened, not only by fury but by the pain of having been betrayed. I wanted to say something to console him, but my throat closed up. I put my hand on his shoulder and whispered, "We are going to find a way, Eddie, I promise you." But inside, I was also fighting against hopelessness. We already had proof of the arsenic, Valerie's secret conversations, but to prove she pushed Eddie into the sea, we needed something more concrete, stronger. We drove aimlessly, just so our minds wouldn't explode. The familiar streets of the city passed by the window, but I saw nothing but Valerie's keen as cold face in my memory. Suddenly, Eddie braked sharply on the side of the road. The tires screeched and I almost hit the dashboard. He sat up straight with eyes wide open, illuminated. "The drone!" he blurted out excitedly. I stood perplexed, not understanding. "Drone? What are you talking about?" Eddie turned to me with an expression as if he had just seen a light at the end of the tunnel. "Yes, Mom. Jay's party on the yacht. He hired a professional team to film the whole event. They used, above all, a drone to capture aerial shots of the boat at sea. I remember it well. It was flying overhead all night." He spoke fast, as if fearing the idea would escape him. "If the drone recorded the deck. Maybe it captured the moment she pushed me." A spark of hope lit up inside me, but it came accompanied by fear. Did such a video really exist? And if it existed, would it be clear enough to serve as proof? I took Eddie's hand with a trembling voice. "Are you sure? If we manage to find it." Eddie nodded with eyes lit up. "Yes, Mom, we have to try." Eddie took out his cell phone immediately and dialed the number of Jay, his best friend, the one who organized that fateful party. On the other side, Jay's voice sounded full of astonishment. "Eddie. Oh my God, is it really you?" Eddie didn't give many explanations, just went straight to the point. "Jay, I need to see you right now. It is a matter of life or death. I am going to your house." Jay didn't ask more, just said, "Okay, I'll wait for you." Jay's house was a modern residence, with large glass walls and elegant decor. As soon as we parked, he came running out the door with a pale face. He hugged Eddie tightly. His voice trembled. "My God," I thought. "I can't believe you're still alive." Eddie patted him on the shoulder, but his look was serious. "I'll tell you later, Jay, but right now I need your help. This is more important than anything else." In the living room, Eddie summarized the story for him. Valerie, the push on the yacht, the plan to poison me. Jay stood open-mouthed, unable to believe what he was hearing. When Eddie mentioned the drone camera, Jay slapped his forehead, as if suddenly remembering something. "Of course, the fly cam." He jumped to his feet, voice accelerated. After the accident, everyone was in shock. The party was canceled immediately. I had already paid the film crew, but I never asked them to edit or review the footage. It was too painful. I think I still have the original files. Jay took us to his studio, where he had a modern computer system and a shelf full of external hard drives. He started rummaging through them one by one, murmuring, "Luckily, I have the habit of backing everything up. Let me look." I sat with my heart beating with force, hands squeezing the edge of the chair. Eddie stood behind Jay without taking his eyes off the screen. Every time he connected a new drive, it was as if we held our breath. Finally, Jay exclaimed, "Here it is. Yacht. Unedited material." He connected the drive to the computer and dozens of video files appeared on the screen. We started watching them one by one. Every second seemed to last an eternity. The images of the party from 2 years ago revived laughter, music, happy faces. I saw myself toasting with Eddie with a big smile on his face. A stabbing pain crossed my chest, as if a razor reopened an old wound. After almost an hour, when I was beginning to lose hope, Eddie pointed at the screen. "Stop. Go back a bit." His voice was tense, charged with hope. Jay rewound the video and we saw it. A shot from the drone, high up, showing the whole yacht over the glistening sea. The camera slowly panned toward the upper deck, the area with fewer lights. And then we saw it clearly. 2 small figures arguing heatedly. Although there was no sound, their movements were as clear as the light of day. The man's figure turned around and the woman's figure lunged suddenly, pushing him with both hands. The silhouette of the man fell into the sea, leaving a white trail on the surface. The drone kept hovering, recording how the woman stood looking at the water for a few seconds without screaming, without asking for help. Then, with total calm, she fixed her hair, turned around, and walked inside with tranquility, blending in with the lights and music of the party. The room was in absolute silence. Jay stammered with a trembling voice, "I can't believe it. It's Valerie." He turned to Eddie with eyes wide open from the impact. Eddie leaned back in the chair and let out a long sigh, as if a weight had been lifted off him. "The final piece," he said with a raspy voice. "The most important one. We have it." I covered my mouth and tears broke forth. Seeing Valerie push Eddie into the sea, her icy gaze observing the water, was like a direct stab to the heart. I squeezed Eddie's hand and felt how his tensed. "We did it, Mom," he whispered with eyes shining with determination. I nodded with a broken voice. "She is going to pay for this." The next morning I woke up with a mixture of relief and tension. Today was the day Eddie, Jay, and I would go together to the Central Police Station. Mr. Reeves was already waiting for us there, with an old leather briefcase containing all the documents he had compiled. Upon seeing him, with his graying hair and that sharp look, I felt a ray of hope. We were led to the office of the Chief Inspector, Mr. Richard Morse, a middle-aged man with a serious expression and eyes full of skepticism. When we began to recount the story, he remained motionless with hands clasped and an unperturbed face. "A person who died 2 years ago suddenly appears alive and accuses his wife of attempted murder," he said with a grave voice, almost sarcastic. "Sounds like a cheap novel." I felt blood rise to my face, but Eddie squeezed my hand under the table, indicating I should keep calm. He stood up and spoke firmly. "Sir, we don't come with simple words. We have proof." Then we began to present everything we had gathered. First, the arsenic analysis with the word arsenic circled in red. Inspector Morse frowned and took the paper to examine it in detail. Then, Mr. Reeves handed over a stack of photos of Valerie meeting with a poison dealer, along with a chilling audio recording where she admitted she delayed my death to not raise suspicions. Every word of Valerie's in that recording was like a knife slash, making me tremble with rage and pain. But the final blow arrived when Eddie connected the hard drive to the inspector's computer and played the drone video. The room went completely silent. Everyone held their breath, With eyes fixed on the screen, the image of Valerie pushing Eddie into the sea, her cold look observing the water, and then her tranquility turning around and walking away, appeared with total clarity. When the video ended, Inspector Morse leaned back in his chair with a hardened face. He looked at Eddie and me and with a grave voice, without a trace of doubt, said, "Mrs. Vance, we regret what you have had to live through. We will proceed to arrest Mrs. Valerie Vance immediately." I took a deep breath, feeling my chest lighten, but I knew it wasn't over yet. I looked at Inspector Morse and told him firmly, "Sir, I want to return home before you arrive. I want to be there to see her fall." Morse nodded, but put one condition: you must stay in your room and not intervene. I accepted, although inside I only desired to confront Valerie, look her in the eyes when everything came to light. Eddie stayed at the station to present his official statement, while I took a taxi back home, with my heart beating forcefully during the entire trip. The mansion was strangely silent when I entered. Valerie was sitting in the living room painting her nails an intense red, and the light from the chandelier made her nails shine as if they were covered in blood. Upon seeing me, she raised her head and with an annoyed tone said, "Where have you been all morning, Mom? Lately, you go out a lot." I didn't answer. I simply went up the stairs in silence, feeling her gaze stick into me like a frozen blade. I entered my room, stood by the window, and looked toward the front yard. An hour later, the doorbell rang sharp and firm. I heard Valerie's footsteps heading to the door and her shrill voice. "Who are you looking for?" Then silence. The voice of Inspector Morse was heard clear and solemn. "Valerie Vance, you are under arrest on suspicion of poisoning Mrs. Eleanor Vance and attempted homicide against Mr. Eddie Vance." A heart-wrenching scream broke the air. Furniture falling and struggles were heard. Valerie screamed, her voice overflowing with panic. "You're crazy. My husband is dead. That old woman is slandering me." I left the room, stood at the edge of the staircase, and looked down. 2 female police officers held Valerie by the arms. Her hair was messy, and her makeup running from tears. Upon seeing me, her eyes lit up with fury. "You!" she shouted, pointing at me. "This is all you're doing, isn't it? You want to destroy me?" I stood there without saying anything. I just looked at her coldly. Inspector Morse made a signal. An officer turned on a tablet and the drone video began to play in the living room. It clearly showed Valerie pushing Eddie into the sea. There was no way to deny it. All of Valerie's energy seemed to vanish. She collapsed to the floor, legs without strength, her screams turning into desperate sobs. No, it can't be," she murmured, hugging her head as if wanting to flee from her own crime. Just as they put the handcuffs on Valerie, I received a call from Mr. Reeves. Another group of police had raided the slums and captured the poison dealer named Paul. He confessed everything from having provided arsenic to Valerie to the call on the yacht 2 years ago, when he pressured her to execute the plan. The net of justice closed without escape. When the police car transporting Valerie drove away, I remained standing in front of the mansion, watching it until it disappeared. A sensation of immense relief invaded me, as if a 2,000-pound stone had been lifted from my chest. The nightmare had truly ended. A few months after Valerie's arrest, the trial was held, attracting the attention of the whole country. The story of the husband who returned from the dead to unmask his murderous wife appeared in every newspaper, becoming the topic of conversation in every corner. Eddie and I entered the courtroom, packed with journalists, with cameras and microphones ready. The flashes popped nonstop, but I didn't care. I only wanted to see justice served, to close a painful chapter of my life. We sat in the front row, near the judge's bench. She was gaunt, pale, her hair once shiny, now dull and unkempt, dressed in a gray prisoner uniform. She kept her head down, not daring to lift it, not daring to look toward me or toward Eddie. Upon seeing her, I no longer felt the rage from before. Only a deep sadness remained, mixed with some compassion. That woman was part of my family. She used to sit by my side, crying for Eddie. But it was all a theater play, a cruel performance. The trial was tense. The prosecutor presented every piece of evidence. The analysis confirming the presence of arsenic, the audio where Valerie's cold voice was heard planning how to kill me, and the video recorded by a drone. Irrefutable images of her pushing Eddie into the sea. Every piece of evidence was like a hammer blow to Valerie. She stayed there with shoulders hunched, hands tightly clasped. When the prosecutor asked her if she had anything to say, Valerie just lowered her head and murmured, I plead guilty. Not an excuse, nor an apology. Valerie's lawyer tried to defend her, saying she acted pressured by debts, that she was remorseful. The defendant has lived with guilt, Your Honor, said the lawyer, pointing to Valerie, who was now crying inconsolably. But those late tears couldn't erase the cold-blooded crime she committed. I looked at her, remembering the cups of chamomile tea, the feigned smiles, and felt a knot in my chest.